Of the Next Generation films, this one has, I think, a bit of a funny place in people's minds. And I realize I'm generalizing, but what's the first thing that jumps to mind when you think of Insurrection? Is it, like me, the baby-faced Riker? Is it the fact that there were some cool ideas introduced that were then never mentioned again? Or is it that old argument that always gets used, it feels like an episode? Which I'm not saying is invalid, by the way. What is it that pops to mind for you when you think of Star Trek Insurrection? I remember my first experience with the film a bit better than I remember some of the other ones, because it's slightly more recent. I mean, it's only... oh Lord, I'm old. Went to the same cinema that I saw Generations in. It was the first Star Trek film that I watched in the cinema on my own. I can only assume that I had really annoyed my dad that day or something. Sorry, Dad. But yes, I vividly remember watching it, and I remember being excited by the trailer, the shot of the Enterprise E in the briar patch. You know the one I'm talking about. There's a lot to get through, so shall we take this opportunity to dive straight in to all of the ups and downs for Star Trek Insurrection. Well, I'm pretty sure you all know what the first up is going to be. Jerry Goldsmith! I love the score for Star Trek Insurrection. There's a lot more peaceful music in it. You've still got your action cues, which I quite enjoy, but that opening theme that plays over the Baku village is just beautiful. And of course, we get a couple of reprises throughout the film. I think when it comes to the next gen films, First Contact probably has the better overall theme, but I do find myself listening to the Insurrection soundtrack just a little bit more often. Another up will go to returning director Jonathan Frakes. Obviously, he's pulling double duties again here because Riker is not only in the film, but he gets a little bit more to do in Star Trek Insurrection as well. If I had a tiny little critique about First Contact, it might be that Riker feels, I won't say entirely sidelined, but very much left out of the action in First Contact. They make it work. Whereas here, we definitely get action with Jonathan Frakes. Ironically, despite what I just said about the peaceful opening theme for Insurrection, my next up goes to how we sort of jump straight into the action. Long story short, it's a duck blind. So you have Federation officers and their new friends walking around in cloaked suits, and straight away there's some sort of commotion going on in the hills. Two people seem to be chasing another person. Ooh, who could it be? I'm not gonna lie, it's an up for me that, I mean, obviously, at this stage, we all knew Brent Spiner's voice. We knew it was Data straight away. Plus, I'm pretty sure they say it's the android, but you know what I mean. What's the mystery? Why is Data being chased? What's going on here? What I will give my first down to in this film is, have none of these people ever done a surveillance thing before? They start shooting phasers at him. And there's no order, like what are you doing? You've got this village who are supposed to be, you know, pre-warp as far as you know, and the next thing you're shooting phasers at them? I know the reveal that comes later on, don't get me wrong, but as presented, it's a bit like, I would scrap the entire mission here based on this. I will, however, give an up to the depictions of invisibility throughout this scene. I love the flowers getting knocked over. You know, you see through the viewfinder, Data tosses a guy through the air. What the Baku, oh, we all know who the Baku are. Anyway, what the Baku see is just suddenly the lake is splashing around. I think it looks really, really good. And as well then, when Data takes off his helmet, that looks really, really good when he starts ripping pieces of his costume, which, by the way, I mean, like, you can just take it off. But anyway, he starts ripping pieces of his uniform off. It looks really good. Considering this was being made in the late 90s, that's not bad. And I tell you what, on a theme, my next up is Data firing and revealing the overall duck blind. Like, I remember watching that in the cinema being like, that looks cool. Okay, my thoughts not quite being the same as my thoughts are now. Now I'm like, yeah, that's actually not a bad depiction of, you know, how they're meshing CGI with the overall rock face. You know, yeah, okay, some stuff is dated. No, at the time I was going, ooh, that looks good. And also, we don't know what's going on. All we know is that someone was shooting at Data. He's got a big wound on his neck. Next thing, he's shooting at a Starfleet operation. What's going on? Cut to taken up the reveal of the Enterprise E in this film. I'll get into it a little bit in temporal observations, but pretty much 99.999% of this film, like space shots and everything, are CGI. And I'm not gonna lie, it looks pretty good. And the reason I'm saying it like that, it's like, Sean, that's quite disrespectful. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. This film was not handled by Industrial Light and Magic. It was busy doing Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Remember the last time a Star Trek film was done without ILM? Yes, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, I'm looking at you, but I don't have that same feeling here for Star Trek Insurrection. This was shipped out to 2 VFX houses. Those houses were Blue Sky VIFX and Santa Barbara Studios. And I'm gonna say right now, I think they did a bloody phenomenal job. Basically, it was the first Star Trek feature film to have such a large amount of CGI in it as well. There's more special effects CGI scenes in this film, certainly than there was in First Contact. Because remember, for First Contact, you've still got physical models in use there. Whereas for the most part, you don't have physical models being used in this film. This was, as well, like if you think about what was going on in Deep Space Nine, which I will get to, and in Voyager as well, they were both moving toward using almost exclusively CGI as well. I have so much forgiveness, don't get me wrong, for TV budgets. I think they did really, really good. And yeah, for a feature film, for the budget, I think it looked pretty good. It's also one that's really benefited from the recent 4K restoration as well. I will say that. Like, if you can get a chance to watch the 4K of it, it looks great. Anyway, let me continue talking about the film. I am going to give an up to the new dress uniforms that were introduced in this film. I know they were introduced here. I feel they played a bigger part in the next film, so forgive me if I sort of skip past them a little bit here. They look great. They do look great. But I have to say, this might be controversial, I like the lighter overall tone. There's a way of doing that not so well, Star Trek V, and there's a way of doing it very well, Star Trek IV, and I think Insurrection somewhere in the middle. The action tends to work, the lighter tone tends to work. When you have any lighter piece of work following a serious heavy film in the way that this is following First Contact, you're gonna run the risk. Well, you're gonna have inevitable comparison anyway. Although I think as Trekkies, what is it we hear? This feels like a long episode. We have a lot of the next generation to compare it to. I feel that it works. You know, you have that scene where they're all getting ready for the Evora, Eugene Chefaw. I enjoy that. You have, Riker, Troy, Crusher, they're sort of teasing Picard. It's nice not to open with an invasion. You know what I mean? Picard specifically mentions that the Dominion negotiations are ongoing. So let's address the stardate in the room, because up, Worf is in this film. Down, how they explain Worf being in this film. Roughly, this film is set in 2375, which is the final year of the Dominion War, or more specifically, Season 7 of Deep Space Nine. Worf, of course, is a lead character on Deep Space Nine at this point, and even more specifically, spoiler alert, the 6th season of Deep Space Nine came to a close with the death of Jadzia Dax and the departure of Terry Farrell. And as the years have gone on, we have found out the less than pleasant details surrounding that departure. In universe, of course, Jadzia and Worf were married. Not one person mentions Jadzia Dax in this film, considering this will have happened in the months following her death. It's sort of suggested that this happens somewhere around the middle of Season 7, so Ezri already has the Dax symbiont at this point. It goes without saying, this crew, who Worf has known, for 11, 12 years at this point, you might mention, are you okay? In the behind the scenes, in Michael Pillar's book, Fade In, his book that he wrote in making Star Trek Insurrection, which I'll get more into in Temporal Observations, he specifically says Rick Berman made the call to not include a line referencing Jadzia Dax, claiming you basically couldn't rely on the audience having watched Deep Space Nine. That tastes bad. It really tastes bad, because for this whole film, which is light in tone and you have a lot of playing around with Worf and using him as a comedic character, look, odds are people were probably watching Deep Space Nine at this point. So it really feels like a deliberate, we don't want to touch on that subject, and specifically, we don't want to bring up Dax here. And it just feels weird and wrong. So in that down, what you have on screen is Worf shows up and nobody asks him, "Are you okay, mate?" We get to the reception for the Evora. Picard puts on his wee little headband, which I quite like. Again, I like this tone. Eugene Chefa. We have a dance later on. Lots of fun. Next thing, you get Geordi going, "Hey, listen, there's a call for you in here. Data's off in the briar patch." All he wanted to do was talk to you about his paper. Rude. We get a quick bit of exposition that, Admiral Dougherty suggests Data started to malfunction, started firing at Federation officers, and the Sona is now holding them hostage. Quick, send us his specs, we need to take him down. I'm gonna give it down to third film in a row, they changed the rules again with the emotion chip. My problem with Generations is that they gave it the big movie bunch up. We discussed that in Generations. In 2, he's just able to turn it off. In 3, he didn't bring it with him. Why? It introduces too much of a logical, hold on, we should address this. And yeah, it just seems like a very odd inclusion for this film. There is, of course, lots of friendly faces coming back for Star Trek Insurrection, including Lieutenant J, who I believe this makes her 900th appearance in Star Trek or something. Yeah, but still, thank God you weren't assimilated. Despite being advised by the Admiral to stay away from the Baku planet, Picard says, "Yeah, we're gonna swing by and see how Data's getting on." Geordi points out, they're in opposite directions, and he's like, are they? At this stage, again, this is very Next Generation, so I'm really enjoying this bit. I'm giving a big whopper of an up to the design of the Sona ships that we see. We get the, the mission headquarters, the main ship here first, which is kind of like a horseshoe crab, which I really, really like. But I tell you who I really, really like, whopper of an up to F. Murray Abraham. This guy's got acting chops. And also, what an introduction. It's like, how are we gonna top introducing our villain? You had one of the greatest villain introductions of the Star Trek franchise in the last film with the Borg Queen being lowered into place. So in this one, we're just gonna peel off his face and just pull it back over his head. You okay, Jonathan Frakes? No, I'm only kidding. It's such a strong, stark entrance. And also, it's the smarmy smugness and confidence that Abraham puts into Ardar Roafo as well. Lie down, Admiral. The girls will take 20 years off your face. I love him. I love the way he delivers his lines. I love the way he holds himself. This film, I remember back in the day, inspired me to go and watch his performance as Salieri in Amadeus. And I realized they've nothing to do with each other, only for his performance. But if you haven't seen it, go watch Amadeus. He is sublime in that film. He's also very good in this film. I'm not saying don't watch this film. This film's good too. We also have the introduction of Taken Up Anthony Zerbe. He was originally up for the role of Roafo, but when F. Murray Abraham was cast, they offered him the part of Admiral Dougherty instead. He also gets to debut these sexy new threads. He plays a great restrained officer. There's been some things added to his character in kind of beta canon and apocrypha that, hands in the air, I don't like. I do, however, like that in the novelization of Star Trek Insurrection, it highlights that he's just lost his wife, which I think goes a little bit toward explaining some of his actions in this film. All that aside, Zerbe plays the role with a sort of quiet dignity while also having to deliver some pretty rough orders. As the Enterprise E nears the Briar Patch, which I really like as an idea, we get a scene where Troy and Riker and Picard and Worf are having a chat on the bridge, and fake beard alert. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But Taken Up Riker and Troy in the Enterprise library. I think we were all waiting for this, weren't we? 7 seasons of The Next Generation, 2 movies later, and finally it looks like they just kind of went, will we just get on with it? Right, Troy and Riker, have at it. And I love it. I guess you could classify them as a will they, won't they. But I don't know if that quite does it justice, because it was always they will. It was merely a question of when. They didn't have a room in Generations. And First Contact, they really didn't have room. Here they do, and I think it works. Plus we get our little bit of backstory to the Sona. There is a deleted section of this scene which gives a bit more context to the Sona. Basically, long story short, the Sona are infertile. Sort of explains their actions toward the Baku, and sort of, although, explains why they've enslaved the Tarlac and the Elora. Although nothing really explains enslaving other people, so maybe not. But yeah, basically they're running the clock out. They can't make more little baby Sona. I feel they probably should have left that in. As we see it, basically there's a throwaway line that says, you know, it might take 10 years of normal exposure for the Sona to start reversing their condition, and some won't make it that long. Probably was enough at a pinch. I feel like this kind of lengthens the scene. We're flying through the Briar Patch. Worf wakes up late, bumps his head off. You know, Picard says, I don't know how they do it on Deep Space Nine, but here we still arrive for shifts on time. There's a couple of theories. Now that we know Jadzia's never mentioned in this, one of the theories is that Picard deliberately decided to go business as usual. Let's not make a thing of it. I don't think that that's the logic that went into the script. If that was the case, then I might have a little bit of forgiveness for things like straighten your baldric. It's sort of asides. He's not being rude so much as I'm making sure you're the best you. Firmly headcanon. Throwing that out there. Firmly headcanon. The Enterprise surprises Dougherty by turning up over orbit of Baku. Picard has a kind of we decided this was too important for the Enterprise to be on the sidelines. And Dougherty is just okay with this. Okay. But what I will give an up to is the dogfight. You've got Data in the mission scout ship. He's there, you know, making sure nobody comes stealing his hostages. And you've got Picard and Worf in the new Enterprise E shuttle, which I've always liked. I have to say, I do like this shuttle. You know, I love the chase. Picard and Worf, they're gonna go and save Data. That's their thing. It's not about taking him out. It's about rescuing Data more than anything else. And like, we did a list recently about times music saved the day. I like it. So the dogfight is an up. I have to give an up to Mr. Worf. Do you know Gilbert and Sullivan? No, sir. I have not had time to familiarize myself with all of the new crew since being back. They're composers, Worf. Up. And a British star. It's getting an up. Here's no shit, pant and a slip shit. You know, I'm here for it. There's also a nice little, just a bit in that. They lock on to the scout ship. Data's trying to shake them loose. And Picard just says, I'm not letting go of him. And I'm like, ooh, that felt like more than just I'm not decoupling these grappling hooks. Nice, Patrick Stewart. Nice. Down on the planet. Okay, but anyway, they get Data back, as we all knew that they would. Right, he's fine. They deactivate him back aboard the ship. They beam him down for damage control. And this is where the film starts to be like, okay. So I will give an up to Donna Murphy. I think she's very good as Anij in this film. I'm not crazy about the character of Anij, but she plays the hell out of her. The reveal that the Baku are warp capable, it's both a cop-out, because, whew, didn't break the Prime Directive then, and also, I think it deflates the stakes a little bit. I've more to say in it, which is why I'm not going to the downs with it, but I think I would have preferred the Baku not to be warp capable. Around the crew of the Enterprise E, you start to see people feeling the effects of the Briar Patch. Aha, we already had that throwaway reference to, are the torque scanners out of alignment? You could hear that, sir. When I was at Ensign, I could. Okay, so we already had that, but... Oh, Troy's office and Riker popping in. For a while, it feels like they're in a different film. I'm not gonna lie to you. So I do like this scene because Marina Sirtis and Jonathan Frakes are so good together. It's also really nice to see Voyager's conference room there. Oh, so much of Voyager was used for filming the Enterprise E, and I don't blame them. You've got those sets standing there, use them. The only thing is I think the walls are so instantly recognizable. So, I mean, well, I mean, there you go. Rick Berman, we don't watch DS9 and Voyager. Yeah, we do. I am going to have to give it down. Sorry, Troy, you big liar. Yuck, I've never kissed you with a beard before. Cue photo montage here. And yes, I'm well aware Thomas Riker was in that montage as well, but I mean, come on, it counts. It's literally the same face. Down in engineering, Geordi says that, to basically save Data, he had to remove some memory engrams. And I quite like that. Captain, Geordi, I seem to be missing some memory engram. There they are. Up. I like a sense of humor. I don't know if he's got his emotion chip back at this point. Again, stop introducing so much uncertainty with that thing. We're starting to set up what happened. So Data, along with Picard, beams back down to the Baku planet because, of course, in this universe, there's no such thing as trauma. So remember, we have established that the Baku are warp capable. And before I go on with my next point, yes, I'm aware that they might not lead with that for their children, but why have they all reverted to speaking like it's the Middle Ages? Where were you on the day of lightning? Down. It's very, we have gone to village on alien world, that kind of dialogue, and it does not work for me. We're setting up that now Picard and Data, Artem, Sojef, Anij, we're going to go off into the hills and figure out what happened to Data. Up on the ship, one of the greatest injustices in the history of Star Trek is about to take place. Riker and Troy are having a bath together. Down. No, I'm not downing the bath. What I am you know what I'm downing. You know what I'm downing. My Trellium down of Star Trek Insurrection is shaving Riker's beard. And also, fun fact, that scene I mentioned earlier on where they were on the bridge, Jonathan Frakes is wearing a fake beard because it was filmed after this scene. It does set up that Dougherty is paying attention to the fact the Enterprise E is still there, and he's like, go home. Why are you here? Because he's obviously trying to hide things. But yeah, Picard's doing stuff. And as Riker says, Picard's down to the planet. And Dougherty just goes, remind the captain his time is up. Fair enough. Oh, his poor beard. Data and Picard find the source of these anomalous readings that Data's seeing on his tricorder, and he walks into the lake. Now, that is absolutely an up. I love Data just walking down into the lake. It also does a nice little callback as well to Data, he sank to the bottom in a previous episode of The Next Generation and had to walk for 2 kilometers or something along the lake bed to get out and spent weeks getting water out of his servos. Yeah, do you know what? I'm here for it. We have precedent for the duck blind using cloaking technology, right? We in The Next Generation, we have that established. Data lets the water out of the dam and we get the reveal of, clearly the ship is Federation in origin. Is it? Ah, yeah. Looks so Federation. Also, it's cloaked. So, right, my first down is, in what universe is that clearly Federation in origin? And then we're just not going to mention the fact that a Federation starship is equipped with a cloaking device? Okay, park that one for a minute, because obviously temporal observations, we're going to talk about that. So they sail up, Anish comes with them, and they find the Baku village on board because it's a holo ship. There's a sonar guard aboard, he starts firing at them, he gets shot. It's a good time had by all, except the fact that we assume he's a hologram because when they deactivate the program, his body's not there. There's nothing to suggest that he isn't a hologram, by the way. So, my instinct might have been, oh, down, he's not there. Do you know what I mean? Nothing stated unequivocally that he wasn't a hologram. So it's going to save it from a down from me. The down is, in the event of a water landing, I've been designed to serve as a flotation device. I'm sorry if it's your favorite scene. I do apologize. It's a down. We take lighthearted a bit too far here. We go into the silly. And just to prove that I'm not a big Grinch, I love the fact that Worf is going through puberty in this film. It is a gorsh. I know. I've downed how Worf was introduced. That stands. So let's have some fun with it. He's got a big massive pimple, and I think we all probably have had that experience where we're like, oh, I didn't need a pimple today. I mean, it's class photo day for Worf as well. What's he gonna do? Which of course leads to the immortal. Smooth as an android's bottom, eh, Data? Sir? Apparently, Brent Spiner was supposed to then go, it is not as smooth as an android's bottom, but he refused to say it, instead going for the shaking the head and the moving away. Oh my God, this is so much better. Up for the way it is in the film. All right, as horrified as I am by poor Jonathan Frakes' chin, which is lovely by the way, this scene is great. And again, more and more people are starting to feel the effects of the radiation. Picard's full of energy. He dances the mambo in his quarters. Absolutely, that's an up. And then he twigs it. Why are we all feeling so good? Oh. Also, the Sona officers are refusing to be scanned by Dr. Crusher. Wonder why that is. Acting on a hunch, Picard beams down and has a chat with Anij, where they do reveal that yes, the Baku are all hundreds of years old because they were spacefaring and they were all moving too quickly and they left their homeworld for a new start, which they found here on this planet. And we get, I suppose you're 85. No, I'm 12. Doesn't kick in until you reach adulthood. Why not? Listen, it's your script. You make up whatever logic you want. Absolutely fine. What it does give us is a beautiful scene. Up. Geordi seeing a dawn for the first time through eyes the way Picard, Riker et al. Will see them. Because of course in this film he still has his ocular implants until his eyes literally regenerate. It is my latinum up of the film. It's beautiful. It's really handled well. LeVar Burton acts the hell out of this scene. Picard is refusing to release the Sona guests from the Enterprise. So Ruafo and Admiral Dougherty pay Picard a visit in a heck of a scene. So Ruafo walks in. Am I to understand that you are refusing to release my men? And Picard goes, we found the holoship. Up for the grossness of Ruafo's no! And the blood just starts to seep out of the little tear in his skin. It's gross, but it works. It's so, because what is Ruafo but this decrepit, broken creature full of hate? And it's manifesting on his face. And Dougherty cannot keep the disgust off his own face. Ruafo makes it very, very clear that he will be getting his men back, even if it means destroying the Enterprise, and away he storms out. And then we get I think the key scene in Insurrection is between Admiral Dougherty and Captain Picard. There's a little bit of back and forth as to why things are happening. So the metaphasic radiation is concentrated in the rings surrounding the Baku planet. Picard asks, if Starfleet and the Sona need the metaphasic radiation so badly, why not the rest of the Briar Patch? And Dougherty, the older I get, the more, not that I feel for him, but the more I've met people like this, just following orders, because that's what you get from Dougherty. I don't understand how it works. Our top minds are working on this, but I'm acting under orders from the Federation Council. And Picard is stunned, because the order is to forcibly move the Baku off the planet to then instigate a process that will devastate the planet for generations to come. Picard talks about, this is violating the Prime Directive. Admiral Dougherty says the Prime Directive doesn't apply. They're not native to the planet. You can easily imagine this much bigger force going, well, they never belonged there anyway. So how dare they stay there and take away this resource that might help so many more people. But I think the crucial thing that it boils down to is the question that was as relevant in 2025 as it was in 1998. How many people does it take, Admiral, before it becomes wrong? 1,000? 50,000? 1,000,000? How many people does it take, Admiral? One of the easiest dilithium loops I've given to a Star Trek film. I feel that is a question that we should all be asking ourselves on the daily. How many people does it take before it becomes wrong? Back to our main villains of the piece, and Ruafo's having another skin-stretching scene while welcoming back Galna, his childhood friend. I do have to say here the skin-stretching doesn't look great. Unfortunately, I do think the CGI on this one is just a little bit too soft. They do, however, both concentrate on the fact that they're so close to getting everything that they want. There is something standing in their way. Saddle up, lock and load. I like it. Last time I gave it down to Data going to hell with our orders because I thought it was too reminiscent of Spock in the Undiscovered Country. This one works better for me. I like it. And as Data says, I believe that the radiation could be affecting certain youthful impulses, except mine, of course. I did have a question. How does time work in a starship? You know, as they say, you know, the internal transporter is rarely used after 0200. You're in space. Time is meaningless. No, it bothers me enough that that's a down. Sorry. But I do like this scene overall. I like that we're setting up to do something drastic. And here we have Picard disobeying orders, again, for anyone who's keeping count. But it really, really works. We also get a captain's yacht taken up. First time we'd ever seen a captain's yacht on screen. Though the Enterprise leaves, Riker and Geordi go with the Enterprise because apparently there's some sort of rule that Riker and Picard are not allowed to be in the same scene for more than 10 minutes at a time. I don't know. But they go off in the Enterprise E. The captain's yacht stays behind. Enough for Uafo to be with like, no, screw this. No. Send our ships down. We're going to take all the Baku. We're doing this now. And Dougherty doesn't exactly try and stop him. So we do get the village attack, which I think comes across quite well. The little fighter ships, they were a little bit maybe running before you could walk with CGI. Again, I think time has been kind. I think they've been cleaned up a little bit. Plus, I really like the design, no lie there. And, you know, I like how tense it is. It's scary because it's one thing, you know, if they were running around shooting phasers and that'd be bad, but they're taking them. And that's even more uncomfortable. There is one thing, right, I mentioned that I gave it down to the Day of Lightning. So this is a pet peeve that I'm about to do, right? So no problem if you disagree with me on this one. Down, Sojeff gets beamed away and this 12-year-old boy goes, "Father!" And it's not against Michael Welch, it's not against the actor, okay? It's nothing to do with that. It's that, I think I've mentioned this in Ups and Downs before. You are allowed to use the word dad in space. It's just so formal. They do manage to get most of the villagers away, so that's something. A great Dougherty moment here. Ruafo is sort of raging, going, you know, the Enterprise E is going off. What they're gonna do is they're gonna lodge complaints, and there's going to be endless committees, and then everything's going to be delayed with the Federation. And Dougherty goes, well, I'll order Riker to turn around. And in fairness, Ruafo goes, yeah, Picard's first officer, hang on now, and he listens to you. I could send my ships to escort it back, but Riker might not want to come. And Dougherty, hearing what he's saying, gives the order. Send your ships. That's the moment. That's the moment Dougherty sells his soul. Up. Because things lighten up a little bit, I'm going to give an up to Data and Artem. Michael Piller said, setting out to write this film, he had a bit of a problem with what they'd done with Data in both Generations and First Contact. As effectively, they kind of, with the emotion chip, and then especially with the human skin, I know he lost it, but he'd sort of got his wish. He started out as Pinocchio, but he had become a real boy. So he sort of wanted to walk that back a little bit, because once you achieve your dream, what's your, you know, what's your motivation? So he wanted to bring it back a little bit, and that's why you get the scenes of Data and Artem sort of understanding childhood. And I think it works really well. It definitely has the capacity to be cheese of the fromagiest. But no, in fairness, Brent Spiner and Michael Welch are really good in these scenes. Plus I like the joke, do androids ever play? Sure, I play the violin, and my chess routine is now just play. I like that. Do you remember just playing? Also, I like Worf's hair is growing. You know, he's effectively going through puberty, as I say. You know, let me know if you've got any aggressive tendencies. Here are the light things that really, I think they help the overall film. Then we get a rather divisive thing in the film, and that's the perfect moment. Do you know what? I'm gonna come back to it. You know what I'm thinking of if you've seen this film. I'm gonna come back to it. Anyway, perfect moment, Anesian Picard. It seems like time is slowing down. We'll come back to it. Out in the Briar Patch, the Enterprise E is flying along, and I do want to give an up to Stephanie Nisnik, who plays Perrin, the Trill Ops officer in this film. She sadly passed away in 2019, but I think with so little script, she does so much with just a raised eyebrow. And I just wanted to give her a shout out because I think she was great in this film. I also want to give an up to Daniels, who gets a name in this film as well, because in this film, I've got Daniel, I've got L's on the brain. Of course, he was in First Contact. He is that very bedraggled looking security officer who was fighting Borg hand to hand and everything. Fair play, Daniels. But yes, he gets a name in this film. And even further, this one is kind of temporal observations, but I can't wait for this one. In Apocrypha, in the novels, he gets a very Irish name. He's Padraig Brennan Daniels. I mean, that's cool. It plays no bearing on the plot whatsoever, but still. A few fun things here. First of all, Geordie's at the helm. Fun, nice to see that again. But they're talking about doing full impulse, and Geordie's like, okay, yeah, let's not do that. That's like lighting a big drum of petrol on fire. And then the next thing, they're getting a photon torpedo fired at them by the sonar. Stage has been set. Down on the planet. Hey, Dr. Crusher gets a line. That's nice, and so does Troy. That's nice too. And have you noticed how your boobs have started to firm up? Not that we care about such things in this day and age. Thank you, Data. And have you noticed how your boobs have started to firm up? Down. It just feels a little bit too silly. I think that's why it's a down from me. It does set us up for some more high stakes though, as we've got the fighters are back and so are the drones. One thing I do like, well actually I like quite a lot about the drones with the isolinear tags, but what I do like, Crusher gets to do something! She fires a phaser and destroys one. There's a recurring theme of Gates McFadden is in these films. Doesn't really get an awful lot to do. Worf's phaser seems to run out of energy, so he uses it to smash it across one of those little drones. Definitely feeling aggressive tendencies, sir. And yes, I did hear you Klingon theme by Jerry Goldsmith. That's an up from me. And of course we have that, you know, the Enterprise is being shot at by the sonar, they fly into a pocket of Metreon gas, and then we get the subspace weapons. I think this scene looks fantastic. I like the pacing, I like everything about it. Is there a tiny little bit of overacting from LeVar Burton in this scene? Jettison the core. I just did. I'm not an actor, so listen, I'm gonna wind my neck in there, but I really like that whole scene, especially the detonation of the warp core, that beautiful shot of the Enterprise being, well, not that I'd like to see the Enterprise over an explosion, but getting blasted up, and that fantastic fire stunt. I'm on board. All of this is good. We get some scene setting back in the planet. They're in a cave. They set up a force field. Artem's little yoke. I like his little creature. I wanted to play with that. Sorry, anyway, that runs away because we need to set up something for it later on. And then we get the Riker maneuver. Oh, you know that's an up. They're going to use the Briar Patch the way Brer Rabbit did. And they're going to use the Ram Scoop, which is used so rarely in Star Trek, considering they're so prominently featured on every flippin' Federation starship. So yeah, lovely to see it being sucked in, and they don't detonate it, the silly sonar do, blows up one of their ships, severely damages another one. Woohoo! I wouldn't be surprised if history remembers this as the Riker maneuver, if it works. I really like that. Actually, I tell you what, again, just to plug how nicely it's scrubbed up in 4K, this whole scene looks pretty nice in 4K. However, down for the manual steering column. I'm sorry, well actually, no I'm not. It looks very, very silly. And there's nothing it does that normal helm couldn't do. And especially when you look at the making of the film and you realize it was included because Rick Berman wanted to reach out to younger audiences. Right, now, pausing time, down, because this is not, we feel like we could exist in this moment forever. It sort of suggests that they kind of literally paused themselves in time, giving Crusher time to arrive and stabilize Anish after that rockfall. No. My poor brain is struggling with that one, now I have to say. They come out the other side and then the drones are back. I have to say, I do like it's very kind of the Magnificent Seven, you know, OK Corral, the lineup, that's an up. And also, have you seen that meme online? It's the stunt doubles all standing together. And someone's gone like, you know, when you order Star Trek Insurrection off wish.com, and they've named, it's not Data, he's Stats. It's a stupid joke and I love it. And this scene sets that up. Picard and Anish, after all of their timey-wimey stuff, they do get beamed up aboard the sonar ship. They get, you know, stuck with the isolinear tags. And up we go and we get the reveal, and the reveal is an up. I did like that because you had that, the scam at the tricorder. Ooh, what does this look like? Now, I don't know, it looks like the cover of a tricorder, thanks very much. No, the Sona and the Baku are the same race. This I like. The reveal that yes, there was a group of Baku that struggled back against this peaceful life. They went off, and as Picard says to Doherty, you've included the Federation in a blood feud, Admiral. Yes. Ruafo going, basically, screw yous all. Alright, I tried to get yous off the planet, you decided to stay, I'm gonna kill you all. And he storms out. I feel bad downing this, but I do have to down the CGI of Doherty's death. Because unfortunately, it takes what is quite a horrific moment of his face being stretched apart and, you know, if you read the liner notes, his skull being crushed, and it sort of makes it a tiny little bit comical. In one of the commentaries, Frakes and Sirtis say that they thought this really looked good, and I'm sorry to disagree with them now. Unfortunately, I don't think it looked good at the time, and I don't think it's aged particularly well. And because of how interesting Doherty's eventual come around to stop what was going on here, in fact, Doherty standing in for what we know the Federation Council is going to do, well, he does say, I do not take orders from you. He gets like 19 syllables into so few words, and then chucks him down onto that chair. And it's quite horrible, really, because you know what's coming. It just doesn't look great. If there was one cold moment in this film, it's Ruafo walking onto the bridge. The Admiral will not be joining us for dinner. Deploy the collector. Up. Also, Ruafo's chair, I want that. That's an up. Galna grows a spine. So at least there's some humanity, for want of a better word, left in some of the Sona. He decides to help Picard to save the Baku down on the planet. They start to collaborate with Data, who's flying the captain's yacht, and Worf to organize, well, beaming the entire bridge crew off the ship. You have to down the logical, like, do they just not notice they were in a transporter beam? Yeah, you do oh, it's a bright light. Mon now. Mon. I will, however, give an up to Salama Jens, because, yeah, it's nice to see the female changeling. She's there. Also, fun fact, Anthony Zerb, who plays Admiral Doherty, and Salama Jens are siblings-in-law. There you are now. Long story medium, Ruafo realizes that he's aboard the hollow ship, which then decloaks. Anyway, he manages to beam aboard the collector and starts the process going again. We're really in the end game now. Enterprise E is getting back as quick as it can. You've got Worf on board the Sona flagship. It's been overrun by a whole bunch of Tarlac, Elora, and Sona officers. Data's on the captain's yacht. One of the engines has been, or the nacelles has been damaged. All right, okay, you've got everyone in their places. Picard beams aboard the collector. I do quite like, it's short, their exchange, but I quite like Patrick Stewart and F. Murray Abraham together. I do wish we'd had more of them together in this film. There is a down that I do want to give to the fight on board the collector. And that's, for all intents and purposes, it looks like Picard and Ruafo are fighting in front of a big giant blue screen. It does look, I mean, I having praised the effects of this film and how it has scrubbed up very nicely in the 4K restoration as well, one wonders why they maybe didn't swap those blue screens out for anything. Fan edits online, I've seen versions where space has been substituted in for those blue screens. Perhaps it's the knowledge that blue and green screen technology is used so heavily to film at the background of actors, but here it does make the film look, well, frankly, unfinished, for want of a better word. So that is definitely a down for me. We get a little bit of, phaser fire. We get, Picard going, we're getting too old for this. I like this exchange. I think it's, unfortunately, that's not going to be a problem for one of us very shortly. Riker messages in and says, do you need a hand, Cap? He says, I might need a lift in a minute or two. Yeah, I like it. Taken up. I will obviously, by the way, the Enterprise flying toward the Sona ship, he wouldn't. Yes, he would. That's an up. There is a slight down to the fact that effectively on board the collector, it's kind of the same resolution as Generations, isn't it? In Generations, Picard locked the probe so that it basically exploded, killing Dr. Soren, killing Dr. Soren. Here, Picard turns on the self-destruct, which then ends up killing Ruafo. It's the same resolution. What I will say, it still looks good. I will say it looks very, very good. Certainly looks better than the original idea for the ending. I will say that. We also get one of our very few amounts of practical effects happen in this scene. I think it combines to look very good. I love that shot of the Enterprise E flying in. Picard is beamed out. Ruofo is completely submerged in flames. Ship explodes. It's a good time had by all. We then get our sort of quick summary here. I do want to specifically give an up to Worf being the one to say to Riker, "Your feelings for her have never changed since the day that I met you. This place just let them out for some air." I love that. So we're not just going to brush off Riker and Troy as, oh, it was the planet's radiation. And of course, as we will see in the next film, we do pick up on that. Galna, or Galatine, comes home, as do some of the other Sona, and the healing can start to begin. I do like that, I have to say. Picard promises to use almost 300 days of shore leave for Anij, who is never mentioned again in typical Star Trek fashion. It's as I said, fromage. Remember, have a little bit of fun every day. And Data does the to Riker, earning an immediate court-martial. It's an up. Movie ends. Will you join me, please, at temporal observations? I mentioned Daniel Sir earlier on. The ebook The Oppressor's Wrong by Phaedra M. Weldon gives him the name Pádraig Branán Daniels. So yeah, played by Michael Horton. 23 years of it. It's speculative, I won't lie, but you know, what else going on? DS9 Season 7, Voyager was meeting up with the Equinox as well. That was around the same time. So there's an awful lot of talk about the different versions of this film. And of course, Michael Piller, who wrote in his book it is now available online, Fade In, is a pretty interesting read. But I think something that seems to enter the overall sort of the mindscape was that, oh, it was going to be much darker, it was going to be based on Heart of Darkness. And well, the answer to that is no, it wasn't. It wasn't going to be darker. Michael Piller, in fact, originally opted out of writing Star Trek Generations and didn't like how dark First Contact had been. He is always going to write a lighter story. And there was a few different drafts, and a couple of them were, apparently too political. And not in that it leaned either side, in that there was just too much discussion of politics going on in it. And then other versions featured more heavily on the Fountain of Youth. Others featured the Romulans, because apparently you can't make a Star Trek story without the flipping Romulans or the Klingons in it. Anyway, however. And the other one then was this Heart of Darkness idea, which is actually still in the film. It's just relegated to that first bit. Data plays the role of Colonel Kurtz from Heart of Darkness, who has effectively, gone rogue or betrayed Starfleet seemingly in the beginning. And Picard is sent upriver to get him, or a version of it. So it's still there. It's just not nearly as dark as perhaps it was originally suggested it was going to be. Fun fact, one of the original suggested titles was Star Trek Nemesis. What a silly name for a film. That'll never make it. I mentioned earlier that Michael Piller was afraid of what he called the Rhoda effect. Okay, so the context of that is Rhoda Morgenstern, who was played by Valerie Harper in the spin-off to the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Apparently, one of her character drives was basically always looking for a man. And eventually she met a man, fell in love, got married, and according to Piller, ratings tanked because you had lost her drive. And that's what he was worried about with Data and his strive to be human. Suddenly Pinocchio was a real boy. Where do you go from there? The inspiration for this film was to sort of make him an android again. And that's when you get these conversations with Artem about understanding the nature. Okay, so he's got emotion now when he brings it with him, but understanding the nature of it. In Picard's ready room, as is usually there, the Mintakan tapestry is on the back of his chair. That takes on a really big significance, particularly in this film, because Who Watches the Watchers from Season 3 of Star Trek The Next Generation introduced duct blinds in Star Trek, and you had, cloaking technology back then. And so, although this is by no means a sequel to that episode, it's a spiritual successor, if you will. I mentioned the deleted scene in the library with Riker and Troy, where it kind of gave a little bit more context, if you like, to why the sonar do what they do. There's a great scene of the librarian wearing glasses, which was a very early depiction of glasses in Star Trek on a Starfleet officer. In the film, you get the shout out to Ketracel White, which of course is the drug that keeps the Jem'Hadar fighting. So maybe let's not make supplies of that. That would be lovely. Thanks a bunch. Also, in the deleted scene, Max Grodenchik, who we all know as Rom, played a Starfleet Trill there. The mission scout ship, the interior is a redress of the Class 2 shuttle from Voyager, and the Starfleet shuttle and the captain's yacht are effectively redresses of the runabout from Deep Space Nine. The love interest aspect was requested by Patrick Stewart. He felt that in First Contact, Picard the action hero had come across really well, so he wanted more of that. But he did lament that there was no real love interest for him in that film. Basically, he went, it was nice to kiss Alfred Woodard on the cheek, but I would like a love interest in this film. And it actually took another couple of rewrites before they arrived on Anij as a character. The problem of the holoship is that it completely violates the Treaty of Algeron, and it's never mentioned in this film. And that's frustrating, because everyone working on the film knew full well about the history of Star Trek, you know what I mean? So, this was a complete violation of their treaty with the Romulans. It's not that it was the first Federation starship to ever have a cloaking device. I mean, the original Enterprise stole one, operative word being stole, back in the Enterprise incident in the original series, which was pre-Treaty of Algeron. The Pegasus, everything that went on in that, kerfuffle with Admiral, well, then Captain, but Admiral Pressman, was a violation of the Treaty of Algeron. And in fact, we got a whole flipping episode about it, whereas the Defiant had a cloaking device on loan from the Romulans. They were on board. This is a complete violation, but it's never mentioned in the film. The lab in which poor Dougherty has a little bit of a skin stretching session was a redress of a set that was built for Star Trek Voyager for the episode Living Witness. It was the museum in which the Living Witness Doctor experienced all of his history. Shot of the Enterprise E flying toward the flagship. Is there kind of a thing about crashing the Enterprise in these films? You know what I mean? Like, we got the Enterprise D in Generations. Alright, First Contact, we didn't crash it. We were going to self-destruct it, though. Here, it looks like the Enterprise is going to crash into the sonar ship, and, well, just wait for Nemesis. The original death of Ruafo was that he would effectively escape and fly off in a wee shuttle into the rings, and he would get younger and younger and younger. And obviously, the footage that we've seen is without special effects, but quite glad they didn't go with that one. There's a problem when Dougherty says, our best scientific minds have already looked at this technology. It suggests that this is way more widespread than Picard would like to think, acting on orders from the Federation Council. Okay, that's bad as well, But apocryphal details about Dougherty. So later on, there is a Section 31 novel, Rogue, that says Dougherty was a member of Section 31. And although this is going to sound maybe a bit contradictory, because I don't like how widespread this whole plan seems to be, I prefer it to be something rogue, I also really don't want Dougherty to be a member of Section 31, because at this one, everyone and their aunt is working for Section 31. It is the most widely populated secret organization in the history of film and television. So I'm quite glad they weren't mentioned in this film. I already mentioned, of course, Picard's immortal statement, but of course, he also says, it will destroy the Baku just as cultures have been destroyed in every other forced relocation in history. We get references to deuterium, which are, of course, the fuel of Starfleet, effectively. The Khitomer Accords, isolytic weapons, which are used again in Star Trek Discovery in their 4th season. We're through running from these bastards. That one I'm alright with, I will say. Filming with practical effects made the Enterprise D and Galaxy-class ships seem slower and more bulky, but even when they moved to CGI in DS9, particularly Operation Return, and then most notably Picard Season 3, The Last Generation, one of the advantageous things of CGI is ships became more maneuverable, because you could do that with CGI. It always struck me as slightly odd. It's like, yeah, we have the Enterprise D, where, I flip and throw a rock at the thing and you're going to hit it. Same with the Enterprise E, but no, it manages to fly around. It is much more maneuverable because with CGI you can do that. The cave in which there is a cave in, did you recognize the Bajoran fire caves from What You Leave Behind? because I didn't and I had to read that. Geordi sits at the helm for the first time since the Neutral Zone in the very first season of The Next Generation. The Sonar will be mentioned again in DS9, in Penumbra, and in the following film, Nemesis. The Evora would turn up in DS9, and quite confusingly, Voyager in the episode Survival Instinct. So that's why they welcomed the Evora into the Federation. Apparently their warp capabilities are pretty bloody good, but we're not going to give the specs to Voyager. The Tarlac, one of the slave races, would turn up in Voyager again in the episode Lifeline, which was in fairness set on Jupiter Station. One of the Elora was played by Rick Worthy, who has turned up in a whole bunch of Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica. Although there was a rumor that at one point Q was going to appear, Jonathan Frakes said quite early on, "I've not seen a script with Q in it," but someone who did appear was Armin Zimmerman as Quark, although only in set photos. He did film a scene where, yes, he went and spent some time on the Baku planet, but it never made it into the film. So there exists a wonderful photo, which you might be looking at right now, of Quark in a swimsuit. And you know what? Good for him. Thank you so much everyone for watching along this week. I really enjoy Insurrection. I think it gets a bit of a bad rep for Star Trek films and for the Next Generation films, but I think it's exactly what it set out to be, which was a story featuring the Next Generation cast. I think, sure, it's probably not as good as First Contact. You know, you're comparing Frakes against Frakes, so that's not the end of the world. I do like that it feels like a long episode. But I also can understand sitting in the theater going, we've just come off First Contact, what's up next? Oh, I do get that, I do. Well, we'll see how people feel when we discuss Star Trek Nemesis and about how people think Insurrection stacks up against the 10th Star Trek film as well. But before we do that, I'm ready. Are you? You have been awesome and wonderful. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can do so on all of the buttons. We're on all of the platforms as well, at TrekCulture, at TrekCultureYT on Instagram. I'm at Sean Ferrick, and Chris is at EditChrisEdit. Until I see you again, look after yourself. Never give up. Never surrender. I'll see you next week.